Olive Hart didn't expect the black McLaren to pull into the cracked parking lot behind the gas station, especially not at 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. She blinked, soap suds dripping from her elbow as she stared at the sleek, low-slung beast of a car gliding to a stop under the faded Olive's hand washed $10 sign. Her heart thudded. Not because she was afraid she'd washed plenty of luxury cars before. But this one? This one looked like it belonged in Monaco, not in the backlot of a rundown car wash in small-town Ohio. The driver stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing tailored charcoal slacks, a crisp white button-down, and aviators that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was dark brown, thick, and swept back in a way that made him look like he belonged in a magazine. He looked around, then walked straight toward her. "You Olive?" His voice was smooth, low, confident. She wiped her hands on her jeans and nodded. "Yeah. You want the full wash?" He glanced at the handwritten sign taped to the folding table beside her. "The $20 one. And throw in the tire shine." She lifted a brow. "That's an extra $5. He pulled a money clip from his back pocket and peeled off a 50 without blinking. "Keep the change." She stared at the bill in her hand. "You sure?" "Yeah. Just take your time. I don't mind waiting." He leaned against the wall beside the entrance, arms crossed, watching her work. Most customers scrolled their phones or sat in their cars. This guy? He watched. Not in a creepy way, just interested. Curious. Olive got to work, trying not to think about how her ponytail was probably a mess or how the soap bubbles stuck to her cheek. She focused on the car. The body was spotless, not a single scratch. Whoever this guy was, he took care of what belonged to him. "What's your name?" she asked without looking up. "Owen," he said. "Owen Vale." It rolled off his tongue like he was used to people knowing it. But she didn't. She'd never heard of him. "You from around here?" she asked, rinsing the passenger side. "Not exactly." She waited for more, but he didn't offer it. She didn't push. When she finished, she handed him a clean microfiber towel. "You can use this for the windows if you want to touch them up." He smiled, and it hit her like a punch. He had the kind of smile that made you forget what you were doing for a second. "I think you got it covered." He handed her the towel back, then nodded at the car. "That's the cleanest it's been in months." "Then you're welcome," she said, folding the towel. He reached into his pocket and handed her another 50. "For next time." She opened her mouth to decline, but he was already sliding into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, the sound smooth and powerful. He gave her a nod and pulled away. Olive stood there, $50 in one hand, a dripping sponge in the other, wondering what the hell just happened. That night she counted her tips at the tiny counter of her studio apartment. Between the McLaren guy Owen and the usuals, she'd made almost $120. Not bad for 4 hours of scrubbing cars in the sun. She peeled off her wet socks, flopped onto the futon, and cracked open her notebook. At the top of the page was a single word. Tuition. She was 2,000 short. But she'd get there. She always did. The next day, the McLaren came back. This time, she saw him before she heard the engine. He was already parking when she stepped out of the garage, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You again." "I like clean cars," he said. She snorted. "You like watching people wash them." He laughed. "You're good at it." "You're weird." "Maybe." He leaned against the wall again, same as yesterday, arms folded, watching. She watched the car in silence, feeling his eyes on her again. She didn't mind it as much today. When she finished, he handed her another 50. "You free later?" Olive blinked. "For what?" "Dinner." She stared at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "You intrigue me." She huffed a laugh. "That's a terrible line." "It's not a line." She tilted her head. "You don't even know me." "I want to." She looked him over designer watch, polished shoes, not a single wrinkle on his shirt. The guy didn't belong here. He probably didn't belong in her world at all. Still. Where? She asked. What do you want? She hesitated, then mumbled. Somewhere with fries. His lips curved as he pulled out his phone. I'll pick you up at 7. I don't give my address to strangers. He grinned. Then tell me where to meet you. She scrawled the diner's name on a napkin and handed it to him. Don't be late. He wasn't. At exactly 7, a black SUV, not the McLaren, rolled up outside the diner. Owen stepped out, this time in dark jeans, a navy Henley, and a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than her car. You look normal, she said as she slid into the passenger seat. I clean up well. The restaurant he took her to had white tablecloths and 3 forks. She nearly laughed out loud when the waiter handed her a wine list. I said fries. They have truffle fries, he said, dead serious. She rolled her eyes. Do you always do this? What? Take car wash girls to fancy restaurants? He looked her dead in the eye. No. Never. She didn't know what to do with that, so she looked down at the menu instead. They talked. About nothing and everything. She told him about saving up for nursing school. He told her he ran a few businesses. Vague. Like what? She asked. Startups. Investment stuff. You're not gonna tell me, are you? He grinned. Not yet. She gave him a look. Sounds sketchy. He leaned in, eyes warm. You'll figure me out. After dinner, he walked her back to the car and opened the door for her. You're full of surprises, she muttered. He didn't reply. Just looked at her, letting the silence settle. When he dropped her off, she started to get out, but he stopped her. Wait. She turned. His voice was low. I had a good time. Me too, she said softly. Their eyes locked. For a second, the world shrank to just them. Then she got out and closed the door. Inside, she leaned against it, heart thudding. And outside, Owen Vale sat in the driver's seat, staring at the empty passenger side like he just made a mistake by letting her go. The next day, the McLaren was back. By the third time Owen Vale showed up, Olive was already rinsing down a battered pickup. She didn't look up right away, but she felt it like the air shifted. The McLaren's low purr rolled through the lot, sleek and out of place against the scent of motor oil and sunburned pavement. You're early, she called, stepping out from under the awning, her baseball cap shielding her eyes. You're wet, he replied, glancing at the droplets on her tank top without apology. She tossed the sponge into the bucket. Welcome to manual labor. He leaned against the car hood, arms relaxed at his sides, gaze steady. You hungry? She blinked. What, like right now? Yeah. Come with me. Her hands braced on her hips. You know this is my job, right? I can't just leave because a guy in a $300,000 car shows up and says he's hungry. He tilted his head slightly. Then I'll pay for your afternoon. What's your rate? She narrowed her eyes. You think I'm for sale? No, he said without hesitation. I think your time is valuable. And I'd like to spend some of it with you. She didn't say anything right away. The sun was high, her arms were sore, and she hadn't eaten anything but a protein bar since breakfast. The diner was a 5-minute walk, and he was standing there like he had no intention of leaving without her. Give me 5 minutes to wash up, she said finally. He waited without a word while she ducked into the tiny side office, washed her hands in the cracked sink, and tied her shirt at the waist to look slightly less like she'd been elbow-deep in axle grease. When she stepped back out, he opened the car door for her, same as before. This time, the restaurant wasn't white tablecloths and wine lists. It was a rooftop cafe in a historic part of town, with ivy crawling up the brick walls and old jazz humming through hidden speakers. They sat at a corner table under a striped awning, and she stared at the skyline stretching out beyond the ledge. You always do this? She asked, sipping her iced tea. Take girls to places they've never heard of and act like it's normal? He folded his hands on the table. I don't date much. Because you're too busy staring at your reflection? His laugh cracked through the air, genuine and quick. Because I don't meet people I want to know more about. Olive studied him. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, revealing a faint scar near his wrist. His fingers were tanned and calloused, not what she expected from someone who probably had assistants to answer his phone and shine his shoes. What kind of businesses do you run? She asked, not bothering to sugarcoat it. He didn't dodge the question this time. Real estate. Tech acquisitions. I started with a logistics platform when I was 22. Sold it 3 years later. She raised an eyebrow. You built an app? Not exactly. It was a back-end system for warehousing companies. Boring stuff. But profitable. And now you just invest? More or less. I like building things. Fixing things. Finding value where other people don't look. And what do you see in me? She asked before she could stop herself. He didn't flinch. Someone who doesn't need anyone. Which makes me want to know what you'd be like if you let someone in. She didn't answer. The silence stretched until the food came: grilled sandwiches, tossed greens, and fries seasoned with something she couldn't pronounce. As they ate, she stole glances at him. There was something oddly grounded about Owen. He didn't talk about private jets or champagne. He asked about her favorite books. Listened when she answered. Didn't interrupt. You ever think about leaving? He asked, dipping a fry in mustard. Every day, she said without hesitation. But I can't. Not yet. What would you do if you could? Go to school. Get my license. Work in trauma response. Why trauma? Because it's the worst day of someone's life, she said. And I want to be the person who shows up for that. He was quiet for a beat. That's not something people say unless they've lived it. She didn't look at him. I don't talk about that part. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. They finished lunch without touching that thread again. When he dropped her back at the lot, she stepped out without waiting for him to open the door. I have to get back to work, she said, adjusting her cap. Will I see you tomorrow? Do you have anything that actually needs washing? He smiled just barely. No. She turned to go, but something in his voice stopped her. Olive. She looked over her shoulder. I meant what I said. You don't need anyone. I admire that. But I still want to be here. She didn't respond. Just nodded, then walked back inside. The next few days passed without him. She told herself she was glad for the silence, that it gave her time to focus. She worked double shifts, took on extra cars, and turned down an offer from her coworker to go out for drinks. But every time she heard a sports car engine, her stomach flipped. On Friday evening, just as she was locking up, a delivery truck pulled into the lot. You Olive Hart? The driver asked. She hesitated. Why? He pointed to a clipboard. Got a delivery. Signature required. She signed. A moment later, he was unloading a large white box wrapped in navy ribbon. Inside was a full detail kit: top-of-the-line polishers, brushes, microfiber towels, sealant, even a custom apron with her name embroidered on it. At the bottom was a single card. No name. Just 2 words: keep building. She stared at it for a long time. The next morning, she found herself walking down a street she never had reason to visit. The buildings were tall, glass-fronted, too clean to be anything but expensive. She stopped at the address on the card's shipping label. It was a high-rise. The kind with a doorman. I'm here to see Owen Vale, she said, half expecting to be laughed off the marble floor. But the doorman simply nodded. Penthouse elevator to your left. She rode up in silence, heart hammering. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that defied logic. The floor was polished stone. The windows stretched to the ceiling, revealing a panoramic view of the city. A grand piano sat in one corner. Abstract art lined the walls. And Owen, barefoot and holding a mug, was standing on the terrace. "You found me," he said without surprise. "You sent me your address. I wasn't sure you'd come." She walked past the velvet bench near the fireplace. "Why did you send all that equipment?" He set the mug down. "Because you shouldn't have to make do with scraps. You think you can just buy your way into my life?" "No," he said quietly. "I think I can support you while you do what you're already doing. Better." She paced to the windows. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "I hope not," he said. "Because you're not like anyone I've ever met either." She turned to him. "You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not. But I know I want in." She stared at him, torn between the instinct to run and the pull in her chest she couldn't ignore. "I don't trust easily," she said. "I'm not asking you to trust me yet. Just don't shut the door before we figure out what this is." She let the silence hang between them. Then, quietly, "I can't be a charity case." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're the best investment I've ever made." Olive stood on the balcony of Owen Vale's penthouse, her arms folded tightly across her chest as the city shimmered beneath them. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment she let herself breathe in the scent of something foreign, something expensive, and quiet, and unhurried. Inside, through the massive glass doors, Owen had returned to the kitchen, barefoot still, now pouring water into a copper kettle. The space was all clean lines and warm woods, with pendant lights hanging low over the island. It didn't feel like a place anyone actually lived. It felt like a showroom. Or a dream. She stepped back inside. "You don't drink coffee?" she asked, glancing at the untouched espresso machine beside him. "I do," he said, not looking up. "But I couldn't remember if you like tea." She blinked. "You remembered I said I liked fries, but forgot about tea?" He poured the hot water over a sachet and set the cup on the counter. "I remember what matters." Olive walked over slowly, her fingers brushing the marble as she moved. "You're not making this easy." "I'm not trying to," he said. "I'm trying to be honest." She sat on one of the leather stools. "You don't know how weird this is for me." "I can guess." She stared at him. "This isn't just about money. It's about my life. I've built everything around the idea that I can do it on my own. That I have to. I'm not asking to take that away from you." "Then what are you asking?" He set his own cup down. "Time. A chance to see where this goes without either of us pretending it's not happening." She was quiet for a long time, watching the steam curl from the tea. Then, softly, "What made you come to the car wash that first day?" He didn't hesitate. "I was driving back from a meeting outside town. Took a wrong turn. Saw your sign. And then I saw you." She tilted her head. "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect anything from you except the truth." Olive stood, walking slowly toward the tall windows again. "I don't want to be some shiny thing you pick up because your life is too polished. That's not what this is." "Then what is it, Owen?" He stepped closer, stopping a breath away. "It's me realizing I've built everything I thought I wanted and still felt nothing until I met you." Her heart thudded hard against her ribs, louder than before, as if it was trying to outrun her doubts. She turned to face him fully. "I don't belong in this world." "Then I'll come to yours," he said instantly. "I'm not afraid of dirt under my nails." She laughed despite herself. "You wouldn't last 10 minutes scrubbing bugs off a windshield." He reached out, brushing a piece of hair from her cheek. "Try me." She didn't step back. That night, Owen walked her home, not in the SUV, not in the McLaren. They walked. Past streetlights and old brick apartment buildings, past convenience stores and closed-up diners. He didn't flinch when they passed a group of kids skateboarding down the sidewalk. Didn't seem to notice when an older man shouted something unintelligible from a stoop. He just stayed beside her. When they reached her building, she stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "You want to come up?" His eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" She nodded. Her apartment was small but clean. A futon, a tiny kitchenette, a single plant trying valiantly to stay alive on the windowsill. He stepped inside slowly, taking it in without a single comment. You want water? She asked, kicking off her shoes. I'm good. She sat on the edge of the futon, legs folded beneath her, watching him as he looked at the photos on her bulletin board. One was of her and her older brother, both covered in mud, laughing at something outside the frame. Another was her and a woman with tired eyes and a bright scarf, her mother. He pointed to the photo. Your mom? Olive nodded. She passed when I was 16. He turned to her. That's why you work so hard. It's the only way I know how to survive. He crossed the room and sat beside her, close but not touching. You don't have to do it alone anymore. The words hung there, uncomfortably tender. She hesitated, then leaned her head on his shoulder. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for days. The following morning, Olive woke up before sunrise. She moved quietly through the apartment, pulling on jeans and tying her hair back. Owen was still asleep on the futon, one arm behind his head, the blanket half hanging off him. She paused, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. Something about the way he looked there, in her space, made her throat tighten. By the time he stirred, she was already packing up the detailing kit he'd given her. You're up early, he said, his voice low, rough from sleep. I've got appointments backed up today, she said without turning. Some guy scheduled 3 cars in a row. He rubbed his eyes and stood, stretching. Let me come with you. She turned slowly. You want to spend the day washing cars? I want to spend the day with you. She gave him a look. You're going to regret this. He didn't. For the next 6 hours, Owen Vale crouched beside her in the dirt, scrubbing tires, polishing hoods, rinsing soap from Will wells. His designer clothes were replaced by a plain gray t-shirt and old sneakers she loaned him from her brother's stash. His hands blistered. His shoulders burned. But he never complained. At one point, halfway through buffing a Cadillac, she looked over and found him grinning like a kid. You're enjoying this, she said, stunned. There's something satisfying about seeing the results of your work right away, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. It's cleaner than investing. She laughed. You're insane. Maybe, he said. But I'm also happy. By the time the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft orange, they were both exhausted. Olive sank onto the curb, chugging from a water bottle. Owen collapsed beside her, arms resting on his knees. You did good today, she said, bumping his shoulder. I'll never feel my palms again. He groaned. She laughed, then grew quiet. He glanced at her. What is it? I've never let someone in like this. Not since my mom. You don't have to explain, he said gently. I know. But I want to. She picked at the edge of her water bottle label. After she died, it was just me and my brother. He dropped out of school to work. I watched him burn out trying to keep us afloat. I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone like that. And now? She looked at him. Now I'm realizing that maybe letting someone help doesn't mean I'm weak. Maybe it means I'm brave enough to trust. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I'll earn that trust, he said. Every day. Neither of them moved for a long time. That weekend, Owen invited her to a gala. You're joking, she said, staring at the invitation. It's for a non-profit that supports youth shelters, he said. I'm one of the board members. I don't own anything fancy. You will. He didn't let her protest. Instead, he took her to a boutique tucked between 2 brownstones in the nicer part of town. The kind of place without price tags. A woman named Celeste met them at the door with champagne and a knowing nod. Within 20 minutes, Olive was in a back room, staring at herself in the mirror. The dress was deep blue, elegant, off the shoulder. Nothing she would have picked. But it fit like it had been made for her. She stepped out, and Owen stood. His eyes didn't move for a full beat. You're beautiful, he said, voice low. She swallowed. You're not so bad yourself. The gala was everything she feared: chandeliers, tuxedos, people with practiced smiles. But Owen never left her side. He introduced her without hesitation. She caught snippets of whispered curiosity from the women nearby. Who is she? She's not from the city. She must be the new one. Olive kept her chin high. Halfway through the evening, as they stood near the balcony, Owen leaned close. I've never brought anyone to one of these. She looked up at him. Why me? Because you're the only one I couldn't forget the second I walked away. The city lights glittered below them, but it was his eyes that held her. And when he kissed her, there was no hesitation between them. Just heat. Truth. And the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of falling into something real. The morning after the gala, Olive stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at the unopened bottle of orange juice in her fridge like it might explain how her life had shifted so completely in less than a month. There was a knock at the door. Not the rushed, impatient kind that screamed delivery or landlord. It was calm, deliberate. She opened it and found Owen, holding a paper bag in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. I figured you wouldn't have eaten, he said, stepping inside without waiting for her to protest. She shut the door behind him, crossing her arms. I do eat, you know. Not when you're overthinking, he replied, placing the bag on the counter. And definitely not when you're scared. Her shoulders tensed. I'm not scared. He met her eyes without flinching. You spent all night being perfect in a room full of people who've never had to hustle to pay rent. Then you came home, alone, and disappeared. If that's not fear, it's something close. She pulled her hair into a bun. You think you have me figured out? No, he said gently. I think I'm still learning. She picked at the seam of her shirt. It's not easy for me to let someone see all of it. I didn't fall for a polished version of you, Olive. I fell for the one who wipes grease off her jeans with a rag and still shows up every day. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over and grabbed one of the coffees. She took a sip, then leaned against the counter. I woke up this morning and realized I don't know what happens next, she said. He placed both hands on the counter, mirroring her stance. That's the best part. We get to decide together. She looked down at the floor, then back up. You know I won't stop working. I wouldn't respect you if you did. You're not going to try to fix everything? I'm not here to fix you, he said. I'm here to stand beside you while you fight for what you want. She studied him for a long beat. Then come with me today. To the lot? No. Somewhere else. They ended up on a bus heading out of the city. Owen didn't ask where they were going. He just sat beside her, one arm resting along the back of the seat, close enough to touch, but not demanding anything. They got off near a weathered brick building with peeling white trim. A faded sign above read, Crawford Community Health Center. This is where I volunteer twice a month, she said. They run a mobile response unit for low-income neighborhoods. He followed her inside without hesitation. A woman behind the front desk lit up when she saw Olive. You're early, she said. We weren't expecting you until next week. I had some things I needed to figure out, Olive said. Is Nancy here? The woman nodded toward the back. Owen kept quiet as Olive led him through the building, past exam rooms and bulletin boards filled with flyers. They stopped outside a door with a hand-painted sign that read, Coordinator. Inside, a silver-haired woman with sharp features and kind eyes looked up from her desk. Well, she said. Olive Hart in broad daylight. I wanted to talk to you about the funding, Olive said. You mentioned last time the mobile unit might get shut down. Nancy sighed. We lost our grant. If we don't raise at least $30,000 by next quarter, we'll have to close it down. Owen stepped forward. What would that money go toward? Nancy looked him over. Who's this? A friend, Olive said. The money covers fuel, medical supplies, wages for the paramedics, insurance for the van. Everything, Nancy said. We serve over 200 patients a month. If we close, a lot of those people have nowhere else to go. Owen nodded slowly. Would you be open to private funding? Nancy raised an eyebrow. We don't usually attract that kind of donor. Maybe it's time you did, he said. Can you forward me the financials? I can have them to you by tomorrow. Do it. Outside, Olive stopped on the steps. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said. But I want to. That's not a small donation. It's not charity. It's an investment in something you believe in. She stepped closer. You really mean that? I've never done anything like this for anyone, he said. That should terrify me. But it doesn't. She touched his chest, right over his heart. You're starting to feel like home. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, his voice low in her ear. Then let's build one. In the weeks that followed, everything changed quietly, steadily, like rain soaking into thirsty soil. Owen didn't sweep in and take over her life. He just became part of it. He bought a second-hand SUV and drove her to her volunteer shifts. He helped her organize a fundraiser for the clinic, pulling in contacts from his board to offer silent auction items. He never made a show of his money. He just used it when it mattered. She found herself leaning on him without guilt. Not because she needed him to survive, but because he made surviving easier. One evening, they sat on the roof of his penthouse, watching planes blink across the sky. I got the acceptance letter, she said, pulling the envelope from her jacket pocket. He took it, fingers brushing hers. You're in? She nodded. Full program. Starts in January. He grinned. You did it. We did it, she said. He leaned back on his elbows. So what now? She looked at the stars. Now I figure out how to balance everything. I'll help. I know. She turned to look at him. You never told me what scares you. He was quiet for a long time. Losing control, he said finally. I've spent my whole life building walls so nothing could break them. And then you showed up with soap suds on your elbows and knocked them down in a week. She smiled. I didn't mean to. I'm glad you did. A month later, the clinic held its fundraiser in the city's botanical conservatory. Owen rented the venue, had it transformed with string lights and white tents, live music and catered food. But he never took credit. He let Olive stand at the podium and speak. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Owen watched from the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable. Afterward, she found him near the fountain. You're not hiding, are you? She teased. Just letting the real star shine. She stepped into his arms. Do you realize what we did? He rested his chin on her head. You mean what you did? We, Owen. Always we. He pulled back, reaching into his coat pocket. Her breath caught. You're not. He held up a small velvet box. Not yet, he said. But someday. She opened it. Inside was a simple band, silver with a tiny sapphire set into the center. It's not an engagement ring, he said. It's a promise. That whenever you're ready, I'll be here. She closed the box carefully, her hands trembling. You already are. And he was. When winter came, Olive started classes. She kept working part-time at the lot, but now she did it with better tools and fewer burdens. Owen walked her to her first day, kissed her on the cheek, and didn't try to follow her in. She aced her first exam. Then the next. Then the next. On the night of her final project presentation, she came home to find candles lit across the apartment, and Owen at the stove, apron on, stirring something that smelled like garlic and butter. What is this? She asked, laughing. Celebration, he said. You passed. I didn't tell you the results yet. He handed her a glass of wine. I didn't need to. They ate on the floor, legs tangled, music low. After dinner, he pulled her close. You changed everything, he said. So did you, she whispered. And in that moment, in that tiny apartment with the flicker of candlelight dancing on the walls, Olive Hart realized she hadn't just found love. She had found a life built not on what she lacked but on everything they were building together. She had washed cars to save money. And in doing so, she'd found the one man willing to give her the world without ever asking her to change a single thing. The first snow of the season fell in thick, lazy flakes that drifted past Olive's window as she stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop. Her final research paper was due in less than 4 hours, and she had written exactly 2 paragraphs. Not for lack of trying, she just spent the last 3 hours deleting everything she typed. It wasn't that she didn't care. She did. But lately, her thoughts wandered. Not to distractions, but to possibilities. To a future that didn't feel so impossibly out of reach anymore. She wasn't used to that. Hope had always been something she carried in secret, like a spark in her pocket. Now, it sat openly on the table beside her, a framed photo of her and Owen at the conservatory gala, his hand resting gently at the small of her back, her eyes lit with something she hadn't recognized until now. Certainty. She saved what she had, closed the laptop, and reached for her coat. The library wasn't far, but walking in the snow helped her think. The cold nipped at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. It kept her sharp. Halfway there, her phone buzzed. A new message from the clinic director. The mobile response unit had not only met its funding goal, it had surpassed it. By nearly double. She stopped walking, staring at the screen. Then she looked up at the sky, the snow catching in her lashes. The wind shifted, and just like that, she turned around. Owen's building loomed in the distance, tall and sleek, its glass facade reflecting the pale gray sky. She didn't call or text. She didn't need to. He told her once that his door would always be open to her. She tested that theory exactly 3 times. Each time, he'd been right. The doorman gave her a warm nod and stepped aside. The elevator ride was smooth and silent, and when the doors opened onto the penthouse floor, she stepped out and found him right where she somehow knew he'd be, on the balcony, coatless, watching the snow fall with a cup of coffee in hand. "You're going to freeze," she said as she stepped out beside him. "I was waiting for you," he said, not turning. She slid her hand into his. "I got the message. About the clinic?" They hit the goal." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You still think you don't belong in this world? I think this world doesn't know how lucky it is to have me," she said, smiling. He laughed, low and warm. "There she is." She leaned into his side. "You were right. About a lot of things. I usually am," he said. She looked up at him. "Okay, now you're pushing it." He kissed her temple. "You're allowed to be soft now, you know." "I don't know how." "I'll teach you." They stood together in silence, watching the snow collect on the railing. Eventually she spoke again. "I've been thinking about what comes next." He didn't interrupt. "I want to finish school. Get licensed. Start working full-time at the clinic, maybe even help expand it. I want to stay here, but I want to earn it. I want to know I built something that matters. You already have. I want to do it with you," she added, voice soft. He turned fully toward her. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I'm ready." His eyes didn't leave hers as he slowly reached into his coat pocket. Not velvet this time. Just a simple key. He placed it in her palm and closed her fingers around it. "You've had access to everything I own since the first day I saw you," he said. "Now it's official." She swallowed hard. "What if I mess it up?" "Then we'll fix it," he said. Together. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Olive submitted her final paper just under the wire. She passed all her classes with distinction and was accepted into a competitive trauma rotation program she hadn't even dared apply to the year before. Owen, true to his word, didn't interfere. He didn't make calls or pull strings. He just showed up at her study sessions with coffee, at her volunteer shifts with warm gloves, at her front door when she was too tired to move. On New Year's Eve, they hosted a small gathering at the penthouse, just close friends, a few colleagues from the clinic, and some of Owen's more tolerable business partners. Celeste, the boutique owner, showed up in a red velvet dress and hugged Olive like they were old friends. Nancy brought a tray of homemade baklava and introduced her ex-husband to everyone as her +1 for tax season. At midnight, as fireworks painted the skyline in bursts of gold and silver, Owen pulled Olive onto the balcony. "This is the first year I've actually looked forward to," he said quietly. She rested her hands on his chest. "What changed?" "You." She kissed him as the sky exploded behind them. By March, she'd officially moved into the penthouse. Not all at once. First, it was just her textbooks. Then her detailing kit. Then a leather-bound notebook she kept by the bed to jot down patient notes and ideas for clinic improvements. Owen gave her space to settle. He never asked when she was moving in. He just made room. One morning, she came downstairs to find blueprints on the table. Not his usual investment portfolios. Floor plans? For a second mobile unit. A larger one. She looked at him. "You're expanding?" "We're expanding," he said. "You're on the board now." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You're serious?" "You've earned it." She stared at the paperwork. "I don't have a business degree. You have something better. Vision." She laughed. "You're insane." "I'm in love," he corrected. She froze, the words hanging between them. He waited. No pressure. No expectation. Just truth. And then she said it back. Not shyly. Not hesitantly. "I love you too," she said. "I think I knew the second you handed me that microfiber towel." Later that spring, Olive stood at the front of a small, sunlit classroom, delivering a guest lecture to a group of pre-med students. She wore a navy blazer and jeans, her ID badge clipped to her lapel. Her voice didn't shake. She talked about real cases, real patients, real stakes. When the session ended, she stepped into the hall and found Owen waiting beside the vending machine, holding a bottle of sparkling water and a protein bar. "You're the only man I know who can make vending machine snacks look romantic," she said. He handed her the bottle. "You crushed it." "I didn't stutter once." "I know. I was counting." They walked out to the parking lot together. The SUV was waiting. Olive slid into the passenger seat, watching the campus fade behind them. He reached for her hand as they drove. "I bought something," he said casually. "Oh?" "A piece of land. Just outside the city. Quiet. Trees. Room to breathe." She raised a brow. "For what?" "A house," he said. "Ours. If you want it." She blinked. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about foundations." She stared out the window, heart racing. "What's it look like?" "Whatever you want it to." "You're not going to show me blueprints first?" "I thought we'd draw them together." Later that evening, they sat on the floor of the penthouse with a roll of butcher paper spread between them, sketching out rooms and windows and wild ideas. A home gym. A glass-walled library. A garden with herbs they'd probably kill within a week. "I want a porch swing," she said. "Done. And a dog." "Two," he said. "For symmetry." She laughed, brushing her pencil against his cheek. "You're serious about this?" He folded her into his arms. "I've never been more sure of anything." That summer, they broke ground on the property. The first thing they planted wasn't a wall or a window. It was a tree a sapling Olive had been gifted by the clinic as a thank you for her work. She stood beside Owen as they covered the roots with soil, her hands steady, her heart full. "I've never had a place that felt like mine," she said. "You do now," he said. "You always will." They kissed beneath the branches, the sun warm on their backs. Eventually, the house would rise from the ground. The clinic would thrive. The mobile units would double, then triple. Olive would become one of the youngest directors in the state's trauma response network. But none of those things defined who she was. What did? The girl who once scrubbed tires in the sun, now building a future with the man who saw her fire and never flinched. Owen Vale hadn't just fallen in love with her. He'd built a life where she could finally fall in love with herself too. And together they kept building brick by brick, heart by heart, day by unforgettable day.